Welcome to our Laurel training for our next book for the end of October and early November, which is Giraffes Can't Dance. Thank you for tuning in and for being here. The book this month, Giraffes Can't Dance, is a very simple story in terms of being a picture book, and so there are some grades I think that will connect to this book more than others in terms of it's a very youthful story. But the important thing is to focus on, especially for our older classrooms, we're going to really look at that theme for this story and expand upon that in our activity time. So just to point out then, really that what we're looking at for this month is this idea of positive power. That sort of is the theme that we're trying to instill in all of our students. The assets built in terms of social competency and positive identity, positive peer influence, planning and decision making, personal power, which we're going to talk more about, self-esteem, positive view of future, and positive cultural influence. So if you're wanting to sort of follow along, or if you really like to know where these themes fall in regards to the assets, that is what we're looking at. The biggest being positive peer influence. So the idea being that I have personal power to choose how I respond to challenges is what we are looking at and celebrating and really trying to bring home to every student this month. The focus of the book is that they have personal power and they can choose to take control of how they respond to a situation or a challenge. And the idea certainly that everyone is unique. By noticing, naming, and celebrating talents and abilities, we tap into that personal power. So there is online a narrated video of the book. However, for this month, I think this book certainly is within the time frame that you have to read. So in the lesson today, the students will practice how they can use positive personal power in a way that benefits themselves and others. The positive actions, words, and behaviors we use towards other people makes a big difference in the way they feel about themselves. And just a reminder that making other people feel good is a great way to fill our own buckets too. So we come into the classroom this month. We've just done our Friends to the End last month. We may want to use that time to just reconnect with our students and maybe even just ask them, number one, do you remember the book I read last month? And hopefully someone will remember that it was Friends to the End, and we can then ask them, did they do anything, or can anyone want to give an example of one way this month that you were a friend to someone else, or one way that you connected with someone else? Or we may, even in the younger classes, if we don't want to have a Q&A, because this is just sort of our reintroduction or reconnection to the classroom, we may just want to review, last month I was here and I read Friends to the End, and as you may remember, the focus was on meeting new people, making new friends. In some of the classrooms, the activity was simply to just teach this concept of how to say hello and introduce yourself. And so, I may, as a reader, just review that again, say, I made sure to say hello and introduce myself to many students, not just in this classroom. However you want to do that, to just re-engage the concept of, I'm the ABC reader, I am a caring adult, I'm someone that you can count on, and that's a good way to just sort of get started on this idea. Friendship skills were the focus last month, and then in this month we're going to be talking about Gerald the giraffe and what his experience is. Okay, I want to also then point out that in your online access through the Project Cornerstone website, there is a great video by Carol McLeod, and she talks about this concept of the black dot. And so this isn't something that we're going to be sharing with our students, but certainly as readers, we want you to be enriched and trained and able to jump into this lesson with a lot of different ideas. And so this is a great video that you might want to look at. And this is one of the things she says in the video, in case you're already tuning in now or you've already attended the training and you're not wanting to do anything more. So I'm just going to read a little excerpt on what she says in the video. And Carol McLeod is, it's a good video, but anyway, this is what she says. I've thought about this exercise many times, and it's helped me to catch myself when I am thinking too much about black dots. Whenever we worry about things over which we have no control or that might never happen, we dip into our own bucket and inevitably we miss the white space. I'm also not suggesting that we ignore real problems that we can control, but much of what we think about are situations outside of our control. Black dots often involve other people and their opinions and choices. Every one of us has beautiful white space. The people we love, the things we love to do, our accomplishments, the kindnesses received or given, and the beauty that surrounds us all fill our bucket. We can remind ourselves to think about our beautiful white space. This simple practice fills my bucket, and I'm confident it will also fill yours. So now you're probably sitting there thinking, what is Eileen talking about, this black dot? So, where's my black dot? This is what I'm talking about. Oh, look at this. Look at this picture. This is something we may want to do with our students before we read the book. It may be something we want to do with our students after we read the book. This is sort of in your outline as a conversation starter. So I may hold this up to the classroom and say, students, what do you see? Hopefully someone will say, I see a big black dot. And then we'll say, yes, I see a big black dot. Do you see anything else? And we wait, and we wait. And that's the point of this conversation starter, is that hopefully someone in the students will say, well, there's a lot of space on that piece of paper other than just a black dot. And knowing my 4th and 5th graders, I will probably need to fold this that happens to have the little words on it that came from what I printed on the Project Cornerstone website, because they will say, oh, I see there's something about it. So maybe you do it like this, so that it's really just a dot in the white space. And so the idea being that the white space is as important, what we don't see is as important as what we do see. More importantly, there's always more to a person than just what we might see. And so the white space, as Carol McLeod said, is that these are things that metaphor of what we can control and what we can't control. We hit upon this theme last year in one of the books too, when we did the exercise with the hula hoop, and what's outside the hula hoop might be the whole world and what's inside the hula hoop is you. So just this notion of the white space, and the white space being all maybe your skills or talents or abilities or things that you may not even know yet because you haven't seen them for yourself in action. And so a lot of what this story talks about and what we want to take from this story this month is this idea that there are new things that you may not have tried. There are so much more to you or to this piece of paper than just the black dot. So that's kind of the concept. So how you want to integrate that is up to you. If you want to do that after the story, it's a great way to take what's in the story and apply it to this piece of paper with this black dot. Or you could just say, what do you see? Okay, well, let's read the story and then maybe we come back to that. But it's basically just this notion of this book for this month is to be able to learning how to focus on all of the thousands of wonderful gifts and talents we have and develop in ourselves, even the ones we don't know about yet. So that's the black dot in a very quick summary. The other thing is that I don't want to focus too much on this, but what they also have said is that the black dot may represent the things that are negative, that's what we see, and the white space is things that are positive. I think in our day and time, we don't want to get too focused on black and white and what's negative and what's positive in terms of that literal translation. So my thing would be more, the dot and the space, and we're not going to focus on anything else that makes things seem divisive, because colors are not associated with bad or good necessarily. It's more the concept of what we see and what we don't see. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So I think then what we'll do is then we'll jump into reading the book, and I also can encourage you in our training that we attend at the YMCA. They also talked about this notion of the 5 love languages, and in the PowerPoint there's a little more in depth about this notion. This is also something that we should not be bringing into our classroom, but as adults this might be something you're interested in. This might be something you want to learn more about, this idea of 5 love languages. There's a whole book and a lot of information about that. There's also in our Project Cornerstone section for Giraffes as Munch, there's this handout or worksheet. This is Mom's Guide to the 5 Love Languages of Children. So as parents and adults who are here looking to be trained, I think this is kind of a nice thing you may want to reference on your own. Any of these things, we start with a book, we have an activity, and then where you can go is beyond just even what you might be doing in your classroom. But some of the 5 love languages sort of was integrated into this idea or this training or this theme for this book. And so the book is by Gary Chapman and Ross Campbell, The 5 Love Languages of Children, so it might be worth checking out. And this is also on the Project Cornerstone website, ways to use 5 empathy languages for students and adults. And again, these are things that we may not be reviewing in the classroom specifically, but I think certainly as we do the activity, you know, as a ABC reader and a caring adult, just having these ideas in mind of how and when or where we might be able to add some of or sprinkle some of these things into our lesson are great. And since the theme is empathy, I'll just take a minute to focus on 5 empathy languages as outlined for Project Cornerstone were this idea of positive affirmations, touch, acts of service, gifts, and quality time. And so I encourage you to look at that as well on your own time. We have a couple other things that I'm going to focus on in the activity about positive power, because that's the theme for that we're encouraging and Cornerstone's encouraging us to focus most on with this book. But certainly as we continue throughout our books this year, this empathy language, since this is the theme for this year, is a nice reference. So when I said positive affirmation, for example, just being specific in maybe your praise to a student or even in the classroom, thank you for doing this. Their example is thank you for picking up the balls at recess. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Touch could be something as simple as like a fist bump or a high five. Certainly appropriate touch with students may be very different than an appropriate touch at home. Their example also same level eye contact, maybe getting down on one knee, for example, so that you're eye level with your students. Acts of service can be something as simple as highlighting or recognizing in the classroom if there are classroom helpers. Certainly at any point when we've shown a video and there's always someone whose job it is to sort of turn off the lights, maybe just acknowledging that. Thank you so much for helping the class by turning off the lights. These are ways that we can, the idea here is, when we're talking about empathy language, is the idea to then be able to sort of reinforce how to be an empathetic person, how to be a caring person by using these types of empathy related activities or examples of that specific behavior reinforces that idea. Gifts might be something even from the teacher. If the teacher, or you know the teacher said, oh, they've earned extra playtime at recess or PE or free time in the classroom, that's an example of a gift that is being given to you by your teacher, and even just in the form of time. And then quality time is the idea of just spending time with friends, teaching something to someone else, or even just walking with a friend at recess, or even for us as readers, just the fact that we're giving our time to the classroom. We're a caring adult and we care about all of our students, and so the time we are giving is another example of how we are showing empathy just by being and giving of our time. So that's basically this in a nutshell. Again, not something that you might necessarily be reviewing in its entirety in the classroom, but it's worth a look. There's always so much to gain from coming to training or tuning in online. Okay, so at this point, that's the background and the idea of the lesson. And then I'm just going to go ahead and, I think, read the story. story time, everyone. So giraffes can't dance. And again, I encourage you, if your teacher can and is willing and is able, I think it's really great when we can put the book up on the screen. The pictures are bigger and they sort of reach the classroom in a much better way than just holding the book. It's also a way to get your teacher engaged in the lesson. If you can say, is there any way that you can turn the pages while I read the story? It's great, because then they're involved even in the story as well. If you have two readers, then one of you can do the turning of the pages while one reads. Either way, I encourage that. So here's the story. Is that on the screen, Barbara? You see?
I'm sure it is.
Giraffes can't dance. Gerald was a tall giraffe whose neck was long and slim, but his knees were awfully crooked and his legs were rather thin. He was very good at standing still and munching shoots off trees, but when he tried to run around, he buckled at the knees. Now every year in Africa, they hold the jungle dance, where every single animal turns up to skip and prance. And this year, when the day arrived, poor Gerald felt so sad, because when it came to dancing, he was really very bad. The warthogs started waltzing, and the rhinos rock and rolled. The lions danced a tango that was elegant and bold. The chimps all did a cha-cha with a very Latin feel, and 8 baboons then teamed up for a splendid Scottish reel. Gerald swallowed bravely as he walked toward the floor, but the lions saw him coming and they soon began to roar. "Hey, look at clumsy Gerald," the animals all sneered. "Giraffes can't dance, you silly fool. Oh, Gerald, you're so weird." Gerald simply froze up. He was rooted to the spot. They're right, he thought. I'm useless. Oh, I feel like such a clot. So he crept off from the dance floor and he started walking home. He'd never felt so sad before, so sad and so alone. Then he found a little clearing and he looked up at the sky. "The moon can be so beautiful," he whispered with a sigh. "Excuse me," coughed a cricket, who'd seen Gerald earlier on, "but sometimes when you're different, you just need a different song. Listen to the swaying grass and listen to the trees. To me, the sweetest music is those branches in the breeze. So imagine that the lovely moon is playing just for you. Everything makes music if you really want it to." With that, the cricket smiled and picked up his violin. Then Gerald felt his body do the most amazing thing. His hooves had started shuffling, making circles on the ground. His neck was gently swaying, and his tail was swishing round. He threw his legs out sideways and he swung them everywhere. Then he did a backward somersault and leapt up in the air. Gerald felt so wonderful his mouth was open wide. "I'm dancing, yes, I'm dancing, I am dancing," Gerald cried. Then one by one, each animal who'd been there at the dance arrived while Gerald boogied on and watched him quite entranced. They shouted, "It's a miracle, we must be in a dream. Gerald's the best dancer that we've ever seen." "How did you learn to dance like that? Please, Gerald, tell us how." But Gerald simply twirled around and finished with a bow. Then he raised his head and looked up at the moon and stars above. "We all can dance," he said, "when we find music that we love." And that is Giraffes Can't Dance. Thank you. So, I think that our students will enjoy this book. There's lots of animals, and it's almost a rhyming book for our younger students. And so it's important then when we're looking at the outline that we would just come right back to the book and ask the students some things as you see in your outline. How do you think Gerald felt at the start of the jungle dance? This is a great opportunity to really focus on Gerald's experience, because this is the lesson and the theme that we want our students to take the most. What did the other animals do to make him feel this way? So obviously there'll be some students who might say that, oh, he looks really happy. And so it would be really important to point out the page and the picture of his face. Does he look really happy? Because ultimately, it's an opportunity for us as the reader to really focus on the fact that some of the animals were teasing him, some of the animals were almost mocking him or making fun of the idea that he would be dancing at the jungle dance. We might even want to point out that, if we notice that the animals were dancing a certain dance based on what type of animal they were, we didn't see everybody doing different dances. And do we think that a rhino can't do the same dance as the monkeys or the baboons? And it's a great opportunity to just sort of expand upon this idea and to really highlight for our students that the experience for Gerald was that he was made fun of, he was mocked, he was questioned, that he could not do something that he also wanted to do but felt that he may not be able to do because of certainly the crowd or those around him discouraging him from doing that. And then we really want to focus on what changed, or what other character did not tease Gerald. And so hopefully someone in the classroom will notice, or we will point out, let's talk about this cricket. Like, this cricket is sounding like an upstander almost, in terms of this cricket said, wait, Gerald, why don't you just try a different song? And so this notion for our students that even among all these larger, bigger animals, here was this little cricket who can make a big difference, is a great opportunity for learning. Certainly just highlighting that the cricket said something different and encouraged Gerald to think differently or to try something new is important for us to highlight as our readers in this story. And then just giving a chance for the students, or certainly facilitating discussion of how or what then do you think changed Gerald's attitude from an I can't to an I can attitude. Because if we can help students to recognize this, the possibilities are endless for what they may be able to try to do themselves. At the end of the book, Gerald says, we all can dance. We just must find music that we love. And so what does that mean? And so hopefully that question can lead us to this idea of personal power. Certainly for our students at Laurel School, this book is somewhat timely in that you'll be reading this right after our big annual Monster Mash event. Certainly Halloween here at Laurel School has a connection to a lot of music and dancing, not just at that event, but also part of our Halloween parade is, Liz turns on the music and the kids do some dancing. So it might be another great way to connect, certainly to our students who have been at Laurel for a while, to say, does anybody remember the first time Liz or Elena taught you the witch doctor dance or the Macarena? Some of these things, it's just another way to connect to kids and say, maybe that'll be the way for them to realize, did everyone feel comfortable or confident doing that the first time? Think about that compared to now, maybe after you've done that a few years, or just what bravery, or what, you took a risk to just try something and do something that you maybe hadn't done before. So I think, there's always a way to tie in some of the things with what's happening in our school. So that might be a nice thing, because you'll be reading right after Halloween. And so the idea is, when we all find music that we love, we're really tapping into this idea of personal power. And so then I would encourage you, if you can print this out, especially if you've been using the book on the screen. This is on our Cornerstone website. We also will probably leave a couple copies of this in the office, so you don't have to all print out your own copy, but this will be there. And this is a great thing to then put up on the screen. It says, tap into your positive power, and it's a little poster of a giraffe. And as you'll see in the little sort of captions, there are some of the things that I talked about even in our training that we may have heard as adults in a different way. But here's what we're going to want to bring home to our students, this idea that be an optimist, look on the bright side. And maybe even just taking a minute, with our older students, certainly, what does that mean? Does anyone want to, say more about that? Or maybe we just read through them and we give the definition to our younger students too. Tune into your inner voice using positive self-talk. These are all ways to tap into your positive power. Build a skill. Learn what you need to improve. Practice, practice, practice. Reminding them that they probably, especially if they're in 5th grade, they're probably really good at the witch doctor dance, better than they were in kindergarten. Why is that? Practice, practice, practice. reminding that if you want to be good at something and use that positive power that you have inside to be better at something, practice makes things more attainable and more successful for you then. Being an upstander, take responsibility for your actions and comments. Find a supportive peer or adult to listen and coach you. So these are ways that we can tap into our positive power, and this is what we're wanting to really help the students to learn how to do. So how might we do that in terms of activities in the classroom this month? If you move along to the outline, there's a couple of different activities. There is a personal power bumper sticker. So perhaps that might be something that you might want to do in your classroom. I think the activity, even just for kindergarten, first grade, probably kindergarten, first grade, and TK, perhaps we might just take an opportunity instead of doing a paper pencil activity and just do a little dance, or encourage them. Maybe we don't show up with a boom box and it's music and we've just danced at the Halloween, but we may use that tie-in to say, let's all try to do something different today. And so maybe with the classroom, the younger kids, you can just have them all stand up or in the circle time with however they are in your classroom, and just focus on, can everybody touch their nose? Can everybody shake their hands? You know, maybe there's a way if you do some simple things, the idea being that some of these things maybe they've done before, some they haven't, but we're gonna try in this safe space that we create during Project Cornerstone time to try something new. And so we're not necessarily asking you to teach any elaborate dances, but certainly just this notion of getting kids moving all in a different way or together, or something as simple as that might be a good way to engage the kids. Or maybe we even just take what's in the story and focus on, let's, I know that they talked about this in the, you know, the warthog started waltzing. Can we all try to waltz like a warthog? Or the rhinos rocked and rolled, or the lions danced a tango. You know, we could even just pretend with our younger kids to, let's try to all be warthogs or tigers, or let's try to do what Gerald did. We don't really want to encourage kids to do a backflip in the middle of the classroom, but certainly as we get further along in the book, we see that Gerald, even just tapping his feet, let me get to the page, you know, maybe we just say, oh, can you put your legs out sideways, or can you tap your feet? You know, there might be a way to tie in the story without going too far into, it's not a dance lesson, but it's an opportunity, hey, try something new. With our older students, I think we have some great opportunities where we could do something paper pencil. We could say, if everyone get out a piece of paper, you don't need to print out this, but certainly we could ask them with a blank piece of paper, can you draw into 4 quadrants, 4 squares, and we're just gonna ask them, just like the cricket said, sometimes when you're different, you need a different song. And so we could lead an activity where we're saying, okay, in the first box, everyone, I encourage you to write something that you think is different about you. And this is something we may say, you know, this isn't something you're gonna turn in, this isn't something you're gonna share, this is just something to recognize right now for each of you. What are your personal talents or skills or abilities, or what makes you different than everyone else? So the first box would be that. The next box would be, what is something different that you can do? And so it's the first box is what's different about you. The next box is what's something different that you can do. What's even just, you know, what's something that you feel you can do. Whether it's different or not, we won't really know, but we want them to just focus on something about me, something I can do. And then the next box is, what do people like best about you? And so we, you know, give a little time for each box. This can be people in class, it can be people at home, your family, what people like best about you. And then the last quadrant would be, how do you feel about being different? And it would reply to any one of these things. And then on the bottom, maybe just have them write, what have you learned about being different? So the point of this activity is just to focus on your differences are your strengths. What makes you different is what makes you special, what makes you unique. So sometimes, you know, that would be a nice thing. With our older students, I'm thinking maybe more 4th and 5th graders, there's also on the website, and we'll print this out as well. This is called the Power Quiz. I really like this activity. I think, I'll read it here. It says, even though you're just a kid, even though the adults in your life still tell you what to do and you pretty much have to do what they say, you still have personal power. Remember that personal power means having some control over things that happen in your life. It means feeling secure and confident inside yourself. It means making choices and decisions. It means being responsible for your own behavior and your own feelings. And so maybe we would just do this in the classroom. And again, I don't think we need to print out a copy for every student. Maybe we'll put it up on the screen and we can just read through it together. And I don't even think it's something where we would want the students to raise your hand if you're A or B. That might feel a little more vulnerable than we want our students to be, but it's a great exercise that we could do with the students to just get them thinking. So for example, the first question on the Power Quiz is question number 1. So you read each statement, and then there's an A or a B, and they're to choose which is most true for them. And again, I don't think we need to be pencil paper writing these down. I think they can think about it and just think about which choice. So we're going to then review the quiz at the end, because there are answers that would show more personal power. Whether they choose those answers or not, we're not focusing on. It's not an actual quiz or test. It's just a forum for conversation or review. So question number 1 is, A, which would you do, would be the way to probably say each question before. Number 1, I would walk out of a movie or stop watching it at home if I thought it was trashy and a waste of time. Or B, I would watch it all the way through, even if I thought it was trashy and a waste of time. And so that's an example of, what would you choose? Another example here, there's only 10 questions. I think this is great. And so what you could do is you could stop after each question, and then you could say, well, the answer that demonstrates more personal power for number 1 would be A. So this is a nice activity too. You could choose one or both. I think they might fit both within the time. Really, it's just an opportunity to focus on this idea of personal power. You have the choice to do this or that. Just like Gerald had the choice to walk away and be sad and not participate in the dance, or when given the encouragement, he chose to dance anyway. And so this idea that personal power can propel us to do things that we may not even be told by everyone else that we can do. So hopefully you can see here that this idea of building a little assertiveness, reinforcing or celebrating those things that would show an example of someone who has strong self-esteem is great. I don't think that there's an example here for role play, but I feel like with our students, I think either of these are probably the better way to go. And then we would wrap up our activity by just focusing on remember that in this book today, Gerald had personal power, and that personal power means feeling secure and confident, making choices and decisions, and being responsible for your own behavior and your feelings. And so if nothing else, you could leave with your students. Sometimes I'll say to the older kids, and they love this, of course, when I say, hey, I have some Project Cornerstone homework for you. What? I don't want homework. But what you could then encourage is say, hey, remember last month I encouraged you to try one of these friendship skills? For this month, I'm going to encourage you to try and do something new. Take a risk. Try to learn something. Or just, if nothing else, it's an example of finding your own song this month. So try something new, and maybe then when I see you next month, or if I see you between now and then, let me know if you were able to try something new and how that was for you. So that's basically Giraffes Can't Dance. That's the lesson, and I really encourage you to remember that in your binder for your team, there are usually about 10 pages of activities and things for each month, and so we want you to know that we're not asking you to do all of those things. We want you to focus on 1 or 2 of these activities that we've shared, as well as to point out that there will be for each month a parent letter that goes home online. And for this month, there's an attachment that is an activity that can be done by families with their students at home. And so we certainly would discourage you from doing that activity in your classroom, but maybe you can certainly just mention that there will be something at home coming to your house via the computer if you wanted to explore this idea more of what your talents are, because each of you have a talent You may just not have figured it out what it is yet because you're focused on the black dot on the page, and there's so much in the page of space around that dot that you may not also see yet, but it's there. And part of what we're doing is trying to encourage you to find your talent. So thank you for listening. This concludes our Giraffes Can't Dance, and we'll see you next time.